With over 150,000 branches, the Indian postal network is the largest on Earth, anchored by massive concrete hubs designed to project permanence and absolute order. Keeping that giant machine running requires strict geography. It relies on a predictable grid, solid asphalt roads, sequential zip codes, and houses bolted to the ground. This system is deeply rooted in history. For generations, standard protocols have governed exactly how a letter moves across the country, right down to the placement of a standardized stamp. So what happens to this rigid, land-based system when an entire community doesn't live on streets at all, but instead shifts on the surface of a lake? When geography is fluid, traditional logistics hit a wall. Standard infrastructure fails, requiring a departure from the protocols used on the mainland. The environment forcing that adaptation is Dal Lake in Srinagar, Kashmir. This is a dynamic environment where tens of thousands of people reside permanently afloat. It is an expansive aquatic neighborhood composed of hundreds of wooden houseboats, interconnected but entirely unanchored to any solid foundation. To service this population, the government operates a specific solution: India's only floating post office. This vessel is a functional piece of infrastructure built specifically to bridge the gap between solid ground and liquid geography. The journey of a letter destined for Dal Lake begins like any other. It moves through standard mainland sorting hubs, following the same highway routes as any other piece of mail. But the asphalt eventually runs out. At the shores of Dal Lake, the topography dictates that traditional land transport stops. This shoreline creates an interface zone. Here, the mail is transferred from four-wheeled delivery trucks onto small wooden shuttle boats. This boundary marks the point where national logistics end and hyperlocal fluid adaptation begins. Inside the floating post office, workers have packed standard operations, like mail sorting and financial banking, into the wooden hull of a buoyant vessel. The environment even dictates unique operational protocols. Outgoing envelopes are marked with a specialized cancellation stamp featuring local aquatic life, marking their marine origin. Yet the hardest challenge remains outside the hull, distributing mail to individual homes. Logistics professionals call this the last mile problem. Here, the mile is entirely submerged. To solve it, a postal worker loads the mail into a shikara, a small wooden boat, and rows through shifting channels directly to houseboat doors. This method requires far more agility than the work of a traditional, land-based postman. Ground workers follow paved routes and rigid stacks of sequential envelopes. On Dal Lake, the postman navigates without street signs or permanent coordinates. Success depends on deep local knowledge and personal memory to track the drifting locations of families. In this environment, the data-driven grid of the mainland is replaced by human memory and manual navigation to close the final gap. For the people of Dal Lake, this floating hub acts as an essential economic and cultural lifeline. Removing this vessel would instantly isolate thousands of residents from the national banking system and the wider communication grid. Universal infrastructure is defined by its ability to yield and adapt to extreme local geography, finding a way to work with the water instead of trying to pave over it. The floating post office proves that human connection does not require concrete. Even when drifting on a lake, an entire community can remain firmly anchored to the rest of the world.